The last thing you remember is the sound of the door closing. It wasn't slammed, not even shut with force. It was just a quiet, casual closing, as if the person who had once held your heart wasn't leaving your world at all, but only stepping out for air. And yet, that soft sound carried a finality you couldn't mistake. It echoed in your bones like a verdict. You didn't cry right away, because sometimes heartbreak doesn't arrive as a flood. It arrives as silence. A silence so heavy it weighs on your chest until every breath feels like theft. You sat there, staring at the imprint where he once sat, replaying the moment in your mind as if the angles could change if you pressed rewind enough times. Did he hesitate? Did he look back? Did his hand twitch, almost reaching for you, before it found the door handle instead? You search for evidence of hesitation because if he hesitated, maybe he cared. And if he cared, maybe this isn't the end. That's how the mind works when it's desperate. It bargains, it rationalizes, it searches for crumbs of meaning in the debris of abandonment. But here's the truth that slices through the illusion. A man who truly sees you, who truly values the rare and radiant gift of your love, does not leave it to chance. He does not gamble with it as if he has an endless supply waiting at every corner. He does not risk losing you to figure himself out. The one who risks losing you has already told you, without words, that your presence is negotiable to him. And the moment your presence becomes negotiable, your worth in his eyes collapses into an option instead of a treasure. That's the first shock most of us don't want to face. We think heartbreak happens because we weren't enough. But often heartbreak happens because we were more than enough, and he didn't have the capacity to rise to it. He didn't know what to do with someone who demanded no begging, no proving, no shrinking. Someone who shone too brightly for his shadowed confidence. So instead, he left. Not because you were small, but because you were vast. And yet, knowing this truth doesn't quiet the ache in your chest. It doesn't erase the way you kept checking your phone that night, waiting for a message that never came. Every vibration felt like possibility. Every silence felt like punishment. This is what heartbreak does. It rewires your nervous system until your body is addicted to the smallest sign of his attention. A message, a like, a breadcrumb, suddenly they become the currency of your worth. You measure your value in tiny, inconsistent signals from someone who never gave you consistency at all. You know this isn't love, and yet you keep reaching for it. And here lies the paradox. Why do we chase love that hurts us? Why do we stay with men who leave us starving for the very thing we give so freely? Why do we turn our bodies and souls into open doors for people who only ever linger at the threshold, never stepping fully inside? The answer is buried deep, deeper than most of us dare to dig. Because the truth is, we don't always fall in love with people. Sometimes we fall in love with the possibility of healing an old wound through them. We think, if he chooses me, if he fights for me, if he comes back, then maybe I was never as unworthy as I feared. Maybe I was lovable all along. We aren't just asking him to love us. We're asking him to rewrite our history. We're asking him to reach back into our childhood, into every moment we felt unseen, unheard, unchosen, and finally make it right. But here's the devastation: no man can do that for you. No apology, no grand gesture, no late night text saying, "I miss you," can travel back through time and patch the cracks in your soul. And yet, that's what we wait for. That's what keeps us hooked. Because heartbreak isn't just about losing him. It's about losing the fantasy that his love would finally silence the doubts we carried long before he arrived. And so, we stay longer than we should. We forgive faster than we should. We shrink smaller than we should. We accept less than we deserve. Because on some level, we believe that staying might earn us the redemption we've been craving. Think about it. How many nights have you laid awake rehearsing conversations in your mind, planning what you would say if he finally came back with regret in his eyes? How many times have you pictured him realizing what he lost, chasing after you in the rain, breathless and desperate, saying all the words you once begged to hear? We don't just dream of reconciliation. We dream of vindication. We want his regret to validate our worth. But here's the secret no one tells you: his regret doesn't prove your worth. It only proves his blindness. Your worth was never dependent on his recognition. You were enough before him, during him, and after him. The tragedy is not that he didn't see it. The tragedy is that you doubted it too. And that is where your story begins to change. Not when he comes back. Not when he finally realizes. But when you stop waiting for him to be the mirror of your value and start becoming the mirror for yourself. That's when heartbreak becomes awakening. But I know right now that feels far away. Right now, the silence still screams. Right now, you're still bargaining with memory, still checking your phone, still wondering if he'll miss you. That's okay. That's part of the process. Healing doesn't demand that you snap out of it overnight. Healing begins the moment you stop lying to yourself about what it was. Because if you're honest, it wasn't love. At least not the kind of love that nourishes, protects, and expands you. It was love laced with fear. Love tied to scarcity. Love that felt more like chasing than being cherished. And maybe the most courageous thing you can admit is that it wasn't what you deserved. And once you admit that, the spell begins to break. You tell yourself the spell is breaking, and yet some nights the pull still feels unbearable. Healing isn't linear. It's not a clean cut. It's jagged, messy, 1,000 little withdrawals from a love that felt like a drug. You still wonder if the sound of his name would undo all your progress. You still wonder if one text from him would send you spiraling back into the same dance you swore you'd never enter again. And here's the part no one likes to admit sometimes. Even when he hurt you, the thought of him coming back feels like relief. Why? Because chaos is familiar. Because your nervous system learned long ago that inconsistency is exciting, that emotional hunger feels like intensity. That being chosen sometimes feels more intoxicating than being cherished always. This is the cruel paradox of love we never question. We think we're drawn to him because he's special, because the connection is rare, because no one else has made us feel this way. But often the truth is darker. We're drawn to him because he fits a wound we've been carrying. He doesn't feel rare. He feels familiar. He feels like home, but not the safe kind of home. The kind of home you grew up in, where love was conditional, where attention was scarce, where you had to earn the warmth you longed for. That's why you tolerated the silence. That's why you told yourself, he's just busy, when he disappeared for days. That's why you clung to every late night call, every breadcrumb of affection, as if they were proof of devotion. You weren't irrational. You were surviving the only way you knew how, by repeating the pattern you were trained to accept as love. Think about it. When he ghosted you for the first time, you didn't walk away. You rationalized. You blamed yourself. You scrolled back through conversations, dissecting every word you sent, asking yourself if you were too much, too cold, too eager, not enough. You treated his absence like a puzzle you could solve if only you found the right missing piece. But here's the truth: his silence wasn't your fault. Ghosting is not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of his avoidance, his inability to hold space for intimacy, his fear of accountability. Yet, you turned his cowardice into your crime. That's what women who care deeply often do. We alchemize other people's failures into our own flaws. And then came the breadcrumbs. The midnight text, miss you. The sudden heart emoji on an Instagram story. The carefully vague, should hang out soon. He gave just enough to keep you hopeful, but never enough to build something real. And you accepted it. Why? Because breadcrumbs taste sweet when you've been starving. Because your heart told you something is better than nothing. But here's the devastation: something is not better than nothing. Something keeps you chained to hope that never grows. Something robs you of the chance to find the love that is everything. Something convinces you to settle for scraps instead of demanding a feast. And then there was the push and pull, the hot and cold that left you spinning. One day he was fire, wrapping you in warmth, flooding you with promises, making you feel like you were the only one. The next day he was ice, distant, unavailable, unreachable. You told yourself, if I can just get back to the version of him I had yesterday, everything will be okay. And so you chased, you overgave. You molded yourself into whatever shape you thought might keep him close. But let me tell you something that will sting and yet set you free. The version of him you fell in love with was not the full truth. It was the mask. It was the glimpse of potential he showed you when it suited him. The hot and cold cycle wasn't proof of complexity. It was proof of manipulation, conscious or unconscious, because inconsistency is not a flaw of love. It is the strategy of control. When someone gives you affection in bursts, they train you to crave it like a drug. You stop asking, Do I like how he treats me? And instead ask, how do I get back to the high? This is why love feels like withdrawal when he leaves. It's not just him you're missing. It's the dopamine spike. It's the chemical cocktail your brain got addicted to in the cycle of scarcity and reward. This is why you stayed, even when logic screamed at you to walk away. Because biology was working against you. Because psychology was whispering, one more chance. Because the wound was whispering, if he stays this time, maybe I'm finally worthy. Do you see now why you accepted less? It wasn't because you were weak. It wasn't because you didn't know better. It wasn't even because you loved him too much. It was because somewhere in your story, you learned that love had to be earned, that you had to work for attention, mold yourself for approval, fight to be chosen. And when he came along, withholding, inconsistent, unpredictable, he didn't scare you. He felt familiar. He fit the script. But you are not a character trapped in an old script. You are the author. And the moment you see the pattern for what it is, you can write a different ending. The tragedy is not that you loved someone who couldn't love you back. The tragedy is that you convinced yourself that his inability to love was proof of your unworthiness. But here's the philosophical shift that will change your life. Love that diminishes you is not love at all. Love that shrinks you is not sacred. Love that starves you is not destiny. You don't heal by chasing the one who left. You heal by confronting the wound that taught you to chase in the first place. You heal by realizing that his hot and cold behavior was never evidence of your insufficiency. It was evidence of his instability. You heal by breaking the spell that convinced you scraps were a feast. And when you finally see this, a quiet power rises in you. It's not dramatic. It's not revenge. It's not a grand announcement to the world. It's the quiet refusal to beg again. It's the stillness of a woman who no longer waits by the phone. It's the grace of walking away not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about yourself more. And here's the part no one prepares you for: when you rise into that power, when you detach, when you stop chasing, that's when his regret begins. Because absence is the mirror men cannot escape. They don't see your value when you're proving it. They see it when it's gone. But his regret is not your victory. His regret is his lesson. Your victory is the day you no longer need it. It was strange, the silence after the storm. Not heavy, not suffocating like before, but light, almost fragile, like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do next. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel crushed by the weight of my own thoughts. I felt still, as if all the noise, all the begging, all the desperate questions that once filled my nights had finally dissolved into something softer. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in muted golds and tender pinks. And I caught myself thinking, this is what healing must feel like. Not an explosion, not a grand announcement, but a quiet returning to yourself. I touched the place on my chest where the H used to live, that hollow space carved out by regret, abandonment, and the endless loop of why wasn't I enough? And I realized it didn't hurt the same way anymore. The wound hadn't disappeared, no, but it had shifted, grown scar tissue, become something else entirely. A reminder, a lesson, proof that I survived. I whispered to myself, never again. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in clarity. Never again would I silence myself to keep someone else comfortable. Never again would I confuse crumbs for love or mistake intensity for intimacy. Never again would I play small so someone else could feel big. And in that whisper, I felt power stir inside me. The kind of power that isn't loud, but unshakable. Because here's the truth. No one tells you when you're drowning in heartbreak. Healing is not about getting back to who you were before. That version of you is gone. She was sacrificed in the fire of everything you endured. Healing is about meeting the woman who rises after, the one forged in pain, sharpened by clarity, softened by wisdom, and lit from within by a fire that can never again be extinguished. I thought about the times I begged for love, chasing validation like oxygen, waiting for someone else's approval to prove I was worthy. And then I laughed softly, not at myself, but at the absurdity of it all. The absurdity of believing that love is something you have to beg for. Love is not a currency to be earned through suffering. Love is not a prize for endurance. Real love, the kind that sees you, holds you, and expands you, does not require you to shrink yourself first. And as the sky brightened, I felt a truth settle into my bones. I was never unworthy. I was just misplacing my worth. That realization, it's like breath after being underwater too long. It doesn't just heal you, it awakens you. It makes you see everything differently. The apologies you never received no longer matter. The closure you begged for becomes irrelevant, because the most important apology, the most important closure, comes from you to you. So I closed my eyes and said it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for abandoning myself. I'm sorry for tolerating less than I deserved. I'm sorry for silencing my intuition when it screamed the truth. I'm sorry for clinging to people who showed me again and again that they could not hold me. And then I forgave myself. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing what happened. It wasn't about letting them off the hook. It was about setting myself free. Because the longer I held on to bitterness, the longer I let their choices define me. And I am so much bigger than the story of who hurt me. I remembered something a mentor once told me. You teach people how to love you by how you love yourself. And suddenly it made sense in a way it never had before. For so long, I had been teaching people through my silence, my over-giving, my self-abandonment, that it was okay to treat me as less. Not because I wanted it, but because I didn't believe I could ask for more. But not anymore. Because when a woman reclaims her worth, everything shifts. The men who once took her for granted no longer recognize her. The patterns that once held her captive lose their grip. The life she thought she had to beg for begins to rearrange itself around her new frequency. And here's the most empowering part. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in the small moments. The text you don't respond to because you recognize manipulation in its sweetness. The date you leave halfway through because your intuition whispers he's not aligned with you. The boundaries you hold firm even when your voice shakes. That is power. Not control over others, but mastery over yourself. And when I finally understood that, something incredible happened. I didn't just heal. I transformed. Because heartbreak isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a deeper one. It's the fire that burns away everything false. So only the truth of who you are remains. I stood taller. I walked differently. People noticed, but they couldn't quite name it. Was it confidence? Was it glow? No. It was alignment. It was the energy of a woman who no longer chases, no longer begs, no longer doubts whether she is enough. A woman who knows she is. And let me tell you this, if you're listening to my words right now and your heart aches because you're still in the storm, hold on. The day will come when you will sit where I am now, whispering never again, not in bitterness, but in strength. The day will come when the tears dry and you realize they watered the soil of your becoming. You will rise, not the same woman, a truer one, and you will thank the heartbreak, not because it was fair, not because it was kind, but because it broke you open in a way that nothing else could. Because pain, as cruel as it is often the doorway to awakening. So walk through it. Walk through the fire. Let it strip you. Let it humble you. Let it burn away every illusion you clung to. And when the smoke clears, step forward as the woman you were always meant to be. I promise you, she is worth meeting. And as I whisper these words to you now, I leave you with this truth. Love is not something you find in another's hands. Love is what you cultivate within. And when you overflow with it, the world cannot help but respond. The right people will rise to meet you. The wrong ones will fall away. And you will never again confuse their leaving with your lack, because the woman who knows her worth does not beg. She does not chase. She does not crumble when someone fails to see her light. She simply shines, and that is the most dangerous, beautiful, liberating thing a woman can ever do. So here you are, at the end of heartbreak, at the beginning of power. And as you step into this next chapter, remember, you are not just healing. You are rising. You are not just surviving. You are becoming. And no one, not him, not the past, not regret, can ever take that away from you. This is your story now. Not of loss, but of reclamation. Not of endings, but of awakenings. And one day, when love finds you again, and you will meet it not as the woman who begs, but as the woman who knows, who chooses, who loves not from fear, but from fullness. That is your power. That is your gift. That is your destiny. And it begins here now with you.